Welcome to PulpMythos. I'm Brian here with Spencer and Larry, and we're going to be discussing the new film on Netflix, I Care a Lot. Very interesting movie. We're going to break down our thoughts on it here in a moment. If you've not hit the sub button, please do so. Hit the bell, leave a comment, leave a like. Have a lot of other content on this channel. If you enjoy the movie review and you want us to do other films, let us know what you would like for us to do. There's a lot of new movies coming out. I know Netflix is putting up new films every single week. So yeah, let us know. So let's start with the premise. Basically, the premise is the star of the film, the two stars, is Rosamund Pike and Peter Dinklage, and it's basically a war between these two. Rosamund Pike plays a character, Marla Grayson. She runs this scam where she becomes the guardian of elderly people, takes all their money, their belongings, their property, locks them away in nursing homes, and just she collects the money. She ends up getting a new client. Turns out this client is affiliated with Peter Dinklage's character, Roman Lunyov, some Russian Russian mob guy. Turns out the ties are to the Russian mob, and a conflict ensues. That was the premise. Full spoilers. We're actually going to talk all spoilers. So if you've not seen the film and you don't want spoilers, leave now and come back later. So full spoilers ahead. Initially, guys, did you like it? Did you not like it? What was the thing that stuck out for you in this film in terms of would you recommend it?
I would. I liked it a lot. I'm not going to jump to the ending already, but we were talking about it before. I actually
you can.
I just was saying I liked it, and the whole movie. There's a couple really kind of odd, fucked up dark comedies, like Father of the Year with Robin Williams, the kid from Spy Kids. But it's a really messed up movie, but it's very dark. Like a lot of the comedy in it is still funny, but it's a very dark comedy. And that's what I felt like throughout this whole movie. I really liked it. There's a lot of parts that, made me laugh. And we've even talked about it, reflecting on how parts of society are super fucked up. Like it's a movie. It was a thought-provoking movie where there's not as like Larry calls it all the time, the barbecue movie, where you're not really paying attention. It's just on in the background. This one, although there wasn't a lot of subplots to try and figure out, this movie to me was thought-provoking. I liked it.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and that's definitely a word I would use for it. It did make me think about a lot, and like Spencer says, dark comedy, and there were definitely some comedic bits in there. And like we were talking about before, when they're discussing her mother, and she's like, "Oh, that sociopath!" And like, I don't care what you do to her, and obviously, you're supposed to see that that's like a reflection of herself also, and that was pretty funny, but I may have missed a few comedic moments because it was so thought-provoking and just because I'm middle-aged, and it's just like this movie made me real worried about the second half of my life. It's just like, how do I defend against this?
That's the thing, So the initial, I laid out the premise, and that's literally the core of the film. It doesn't really deviate from that. It's literally she takes elderly people, locks them away, takes their stuff, and this mob guy, she has his mother, which is you learn later in the film. The character is Jennifer Peterson. You learn that's not really her name, but she has the mother, and he wants his mother back. And so now you have someone who's doing, I guess, what you would consider corporate evil / using the state system evil against organized crime. In Peter Dinklage's character and sort of this Russian mob group. And by the end of the film, my belief is that the messaging of the film was, at the end of the day, there's no difference. It's all powerful people taking down the little guy. She says it early on. There's their prey, and there's basically the victim. And which are you? Very Tony Soprano kind of dialogue. What did you guys think as far as messaging or what the film was trying to say?
Well, we talked about it too. To me, the biggest parallel was although she did it within the legal guidelines, although there were a lot of legal loopholes and she was kind of manipulating the system. Her and Peter Dinklage, who was part of, we were talking about, I think it was trafficking also.
Yeah, they're
So it
both
was
in. Yeah,
it, and that's essentially what, the main, I don't want to call her the protagonist because she's not really a good person.
the lead, Marla Grayson.
The,
Yeah,
the lead, the lead antagonist, I guess, but she was a villain also. So it's, to me, the parallels between organized crime and only slightly more organized legal crime. I don't know how to word that, but they were both um, doing very shitty things that were very similar, and one was getting away with it without having a rap sheet, while the other one had to fake their own death to try and move on with their life.
Absolutely, but like you're saying, they were both running very similar rackets, and to the point where through investigating her and trying to get his money, I mean, trying to get his diamonds and his mother back, he kind of she opened his world to open his eyes to an entirely new area that he didn't monopolize yet, and but either way, they're both making their money off exploiting vulnerable people. And if you're asking about the message, I think that is the message, that it's like, well, in society as we have it set up now, with the rules that we navigate, much like in nature, parasites survive the easiest.
yeah. And that's one of my gripes with the movie. I have two gripes, and we're going to go into both of them. And if you guys have any as well, definitely bring them up. But the first one was, I felt that the messaging, I think the film did a good job, in my opinion, of laying that message out, of the idea that there are those who will, like you said, Larry, they're parasites. And her character, Marla Grayson, and Peter Dinklage's Roman Lunyov, were both these monsters. And they were bad people, and they were preying on the weak. And it was saying, whether it's doing it through the legal channels, through the corporate channels, or organized crime, it's all the same. And by the end of the film, I was like, okay, that's the message. I get it. Okay, I had a good time. There was a 2-hour film. And then we get the final scene, and I don't understand the purpose of the final scene. I know, Larry, you said you've read a few reviews and people have maybe some thoughts on that. But the final scene is at the beginning of the film. We're introduced to one of the, I guess, somewhat victims. The film makes its point that this is not necessarily a good guy either. But anyways, his mother has been taken into Marla's care. At the end of the movie, he comes up to her. He's like, my mother has died. I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't get to see her. And he shoots and kills Marla Grayson. So that's the end of the movie. And I was like, that's weird to me, because had we seen this in, say, a theater, boy, I miss theaters. But you go to see a movie, that end scene is going to be the thing you're talking about afterwards. And for me, the end scene would have been, wow, these two villains came together and built an even more evil thing. That would have been the thing we talked about. But that's not what the film wanted you to talk about. It wanted you to talk about she dies at the end, because that's the last thing you see. I don't know why. I almost feel like it wasn't necessary, and it sort of muddies the message. That's how I feel about it. What did you guys think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? And if so, why?
I I I don't necessarily agree, or well, I guess I slightly disagree, but only because when she passes, it's almost like she got away with everything. That doesn't mean that Peter Dinklage didn't, but a lot of times people like that skirt on the legal side of the organized crime, like she was doing, they just make more money. You look at CEOs of corporations, you look at Halliburton, like all these huge corporations that was WorldCom, like those kind. I'm trying to think of some other ones. Those huge corporations where the people who are robbing people of their money really didn't get in a whole lot of trouble. But you look at organized crime. You look at it was recently in Italy, I think, that they rounded up a ton of mafia tied people, and
Yes. It
so
was Italy.
it's yeah. So you have this Russian gangster who is faked his own death. He's kind of living on the outskirts of life essentially to try and stay clean. But you have her who's out in the open driving a Ferrari and because she can. So to me, showing that these people often get away with things, uh, her dying was almost like poetic justice to me because normally those are the people that get away with that shit. And so for her not to, whether I agree with how it ended or not, I actually liked that happened to her.
Well, yeah, and that was the point, and that's why I feel they cut it that way, because I feel like if we got the more realistic ending that you're talking about, Brian, which does fit very much with the theme of the movie and is more realistic, to be honest. If we got that, then I think they were worried that general audiences would find it too grim and morose, and given some of the reviews I've seen, they're probably right. Is the thing, because a lot of people thought that, and a lot of people, in fact, thought that they showed her with getting away with too much and in too much of a positive light. I kind of disagree on that, because if you, as I've mentioned before, with villains in anything, if you don't show them as human, you're doing a disservice to whatever it is you're making, because I mean, they can't all be cackling, round bomb throwing, uh, monsters, because if you show your evil characters that way, it's unrealistic. She was clearly a full blown sociopath, had all the traits. Was ruining countless lives, but you can't portray them that way because it's unrealistic, and I feel it's more disingenuous too, because in real life, your bad guys aren't that apparently bad. They are living normal day-to-day lives. They're, yeah, richer than you are, but they are, they do have significant others, and they do have goals that they're accomplishing. They're not just sitting in a basement plotting their evil somewhere.
That's what I'm now.
I agree, Larry, that's probably exactly the reason they did it. Which I don't like I said, from a creative standpoint and what I think they were trying to do messaging wise, I don't agree with that decision. I mean, I didn't write the movie, but
Oh, absolutely. But chances are, like in theaters, you mentioned we saw this in theaters. If we saw that in theaters, you and I might have gone, okay, that was good, but it may have also ended with a chorus of boos because
yeah, that the villain
people are
gets
so
away.
angry. Yeah.
Yeah, the because there's a lot of people that get taken out in the film, and I guess you could say, well, there was some justice there. The only two that survive are Peter Dinklage's character and then Fran. Fran is Marla's girlfriend. I guess they get married. They have a little highlight reel at the end, and it appears that they get married at the end. And she's also her partner, business partner. And so, do you think with Marla, and this is just predicting where that story would go if ever it were to continue, do you think Fran would take over the empire and sort of run the business? She is her partner, and she would inherit everything. I believe they were married. So, do you think that's where that story would go if they were going to continue it?
My
I
guess.
don't. I was gonna say I don't. I don't know who would take over because she didn't seem to have the same cutthroat mentality that
No, but she
Marla had.
was
But
with her.
she's super smart though too, and she was on board with them fucking everybody over. So it's not like she had a moral conundrum by what they were doing. But Peter Dinklage can't. He was more of like the silent partner because he couldn't. It couldn't be known that he was in on it, so he couldn't step up and run it. But I don't know that she had the same kind of personality. Doesn't mean that she still wouldn't be an important figurehead, but I don't know that she would become the CEO. She may though, because that may be, holding her wife as she's bleeding out. That might have lit a fire under her ass, and she may have decided that is what she wanted to do. But I don't know for sure, one way or the other.
Well, yeah, and I get the feeling that given the nature of what they do and how ruthless both of our main characters were, imagine if anything they'd probably pay her out. You know, they'd pay her share and say, yeah, you're out. Just here's your millions of dollars. Like we'll hire a new face for this company, and you know, and that'll be the end of it.
Yeah, it's very possible. Yeah, it was just a thought because I'm always thinking of where a story can go post credits, and that was me and Spencer had talked about how I was like, I was about halfway into the film. I said this thing could have been a great like mini series, like a 6 parts show, um, because I was thinking about how we know we don't get a whole lot of detail on a lot of the characters' backgrounds, but they seem very interesting. I want to know more about them. And I was like, you could have told this story over maybe 6 episodes, put it on HBO or, whatever, Showtime, and told a longer form story. And outside of maybe her death at the end, it reminded me the film Training Day, had come out, and um, the Shield was basically just a ripoff of Training Day. They're like, yeah, we're gonna do that, but we're gonna make it a show. And I was thinking, wow, do you think this film could be a blueprint for a series? Do you think it has that kind of appeal, or no?
Well, there's so many people tied into it. I could definitely see at least one season of that. If they were to take this formula and turn it into a show, because you have so many hands that are involved, especially in the way that our main character runs her business. That and there's certain things I thought that were going to be fleshed out more and weren't, because it's a movie. You only have 2 hours. Like, for one, I thought instead of killing the doctor, that the doctor would have been blackmailed or persuaded to testify against them in some way, or maybe say that the mother's mentally competent, and we could have had more of a courtroom drama if this was a series as well. So there are directions you can take that, absolutely.
I think that it would have made a good series just because you could have followed the characters a little bit more. We could have found out why Franny was so enamored with, because she didn't. What Franny was doing was supporting Marla, and Franny didn't seem as much of like a piece of shit that Marla did. Doesn't mean that she wasn't, because she went right along with it. I mean, she's still just as guilty in that as Marla was, but I want to see how that relationship kind of spawned. I would have loved to see, they gave it a line where, my mom was a sociopath. Well, it, in one line, that is a great way to show that that's the reason she is the way she is. So I enjoyed those aspects of it, but just like you said with the doctor, I would have liked to see the doctor be put under a little bit of pressure, and then have to make that decision whether or not, she's going to flip, and then maybe she dies. Like, there'd be a great, and this isn't to me taken away from the movie. I actually quite enjoyed it, but I think that it would have been great, also as kind of like The Undoing, like a 6-part miniseries. It's
Yeah.
basically just one story, but it was a miniseries.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was thinking too. That if it turned into something like that, it would be probably best for like a mini series. And it seems like if it was a show, it would be best served as being the type of show where you have one self-contained series, and then just kind of see where you can go from there. Maybe leave a few loose threads, but not enough to make an audience angry if you don't get a season 2.
What did you think of the symbol of the tooth? She gets her tooth knocked out, and she goes out of her way to preserve it, and then that very night gets it put back in. And I think it ties into the whole she refuses to lose.
Yeah.
And but the movie, spent a lot of time with the tooth thing. That was the message I got from it. I was like, yeah, she refuses to lose even a tooth. She's not going to sacrifice a tooth. I don't know. Did you think anything about it? I just thought it was, funny.
I thought it just by looking at it too, it was also, I think what you just said is a better reason for that to have occurred. But what I was thinking is vanity. She's a very vain person, because you lose a tooth, it is very easy for her to get another one. Like, obviously she had the money. She could have got, a fake tooth or a post or anything put in there. But for her to go through all that trouble to keep her tooth, that, I think what you just said is a better analogy than vanity.
Also, let me lay it out. If you notice Peter Dinklage's character, one of his teeth were like silver or whatever. And so I didn't know if there was some kind of symbol, if the writer was trying to say something with, okay, he had maybe lost a tooth or he got his tooth capped. Now she's losing a tooth. I'm maybe reading way too much into it, but to be fair, the movie spent a lot of time on this damn tooth in several scenes. I just didn't know if it was, if you guys looked into that or thought about it.
I just thought it was funny. I didn't analyze it as much. I just thought it was comical that she, bought clothes because she was soaking wet and everything, and then she bought a half gallon of milk, and I was like, why the fuck did she buy milk? I was like, because then in my head, I'm like, did Fran say something to her before she went out? Like, hey, bring this home when you get, like, so my whole mind was, why the hell is she buying milk? And then when I saw her put the tooth in it, it made me laugh even harder that in a near-death experience, the first thing that she thinks of is to save her tooth.
Yeah, I was thinking that as well. That it's like all this, all this stuff going on, and she takes time to do that. Yeah, so that was funny, and I didn't, what Brian said made sense. Absolutely, that it may be about that. Just her refusing to yield anything to the situation or to this person she's up against. But the milk thing's a myth, isn't it? You can't preserve a tooth like that, right?
I don't know.
Think that is what they tell you to do, but it doesn't. It was very short term, and that could have. The reason she did it so quickly is because it does die very fast. So her getting it taken care of as fast as she did, I think, was a result more of her trying to make sure that her tooth didn't die more than anything.
Right.
With all the things that occur in the movie, hands down, to me, the nightmare is the Guardian program being exploited. Oh, yeah. And no, look, I'm not belittling any. There's a lot of bad shit. People are murdered. There's horrible things. Like I said, the Russian guys are doing human trafficking. There are horrible things happening, but they don't spend as much time showing us those things. What they do spend time showing us is these elderly people being taken from their homes, taken to a facility, locked in, their phone taken away, their rights taken away, and there's nothing they can do about it. And yes, in the case of Jennifer Peterson being taken, everything works out for her in the end. Her son eventually does get her out. But you think about all those who don't get out, and I'm not saying that this is a huge. I don't know that how this program really works, or I didn't take the time to research it. But on other fronts, we do know that elderly people are preyed upon, especially by asshole phone scammers. They go for everyone, but they definitely prey on the elderly. And this I don't know why, but this got me really nervous about getting old.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was that's why I say it was like a horror movie for one. Not just reflecting on yourself and your loved ones, and just thinking about how airtight her operation was for one, and as I mentioned earlier, it's like, how do you defend against that? And she's so ruthless and cold, and she doesn't give a crap what happens to these people. It's like when she's explaining to God, what was the mother's name?
The fake her, I don't know the real name, but it was Jennifer Peterson.
When she's explaining to Miss Peterson that she will take all her assets, that she will die there alone, and like she'll drain her of all her resources, her assets. She'll die there alone, and sad, and not because she wants to do that to her, but because she broke the rules. And it seemed to me that it wasn't necessarily even because she broke the rules, because she doesn't care, and this is the game to her. I believe that she describes it at one point, because she keeps mentioning the rules, and I think referring to it as a game for one, because this is what she does, and that's what she does to everybody. It wouldn't have just been because she broke the rules. It would have been because it's what she does, and the fact that there are people that care so little that they're like, well, if I can make a quick buck off of this person, I don't care what happens to them. Yeah, sure, imprison this old person for the rest of their life. There are definitely more than enough people that cold out there that it wasn't too unrealistic a scenario for them to set up.
Yeah, I don't disagree. It's one of those things where you talk about phone scammers, Brian. Like I don't go 2 or 3 days. It's probably at very least once a day, if not twice. They call about my car warranty or my tax return right now because it's that time. They're just like, your tax return was not accepted, and it's like some local number. I'm like, no, it would be a 1-800 number, and I'm also not going to buy into that bullshit either. Like, what was your social? We can check on your tax return now. I'm like, no. But the phone scammers, that's who they're targeting. So this is just a more elaborate version of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, because and I can definitely relate to that because I've got a couple of older relatives myself who, I have to let them know sometimes that it's like, hey, this isn't real. There's not really an issue with your credit card or your warranty or whatever, and, it's like there's so many people willing to prey on people, particularly in that age group or just anyone who's vulnerable that, it's like it's people like her that are seemingly even, more dangerous than people like the mobsters that we saw in this movie. Like she's a bigger threat. That's more of a realistic day-to-day threat, that we all have to deal with.
Well, and depending on what their racket is as far as organized crime, whether it's drugs, guns, people, what she was doing because I'm thinking of it on a gangster level. He probably had some pull. He probably was still able to do quite a bit, but the amount of people he affected on, let's say, a yearly basis probably was far less than the amount of people that she affected, especially once they went, US wide. Once they became a corporation, the amount of people she was able to fuck over as opposed to the amount of people he was able to fuck over equally. I believe at the end of it, her racket was way worse because of the amount of people it was able to affect because she was doing it in a legal manner as opposed to him where he's got to do it from the shadows.
But by the end, I would definitely agree. But in the beginning, I don't know.
No.
He was trafficking. There was quite a few Polaroids there in that one little quick shot. So we don't know the level of how many people he was trafficking or what other businesses he was involved in. The fact that he had like a legitimate office setting lead me to believe that he also had some other we don't really know all that he was involved with particularly, but we do know that he was, trafficking in flesh as was she.
Well, yeah,
but by the end, what she and him created was far scarier.
Yeah, absolutely. And it speaks volumes that he looked at what she was doing and thought to himself, I hate this person quite a bit, but she's changed the game. He saw it as a game. He saw it as a game.
How much more money she is making than he was? How much the potential of money off of her grift as opposed to what he was doing? She had a much higher earning potential than he did.
Yeah, exactly. He saw what she had and thought, like, well, if I can take this nationwide, I could probably make a lot more than what I'm making right now.
Yeah. I think one of the most shocking sequences in the movie, and it doesn't really get truly addressed later. I mean, it comes up once, but the nursing home attack, because I'm like, they attack the guy that owns the nursing home. A shooting fight breaks out. People die. I mean, that was a crazy ass sequence, and I was thinking, wouldn't something like that cause that nursing home to shut down, or more presence? And like I say, it's a movie, so you don't have time to really explore all that you would in a series. But I'm like, that's a pretty. Once I saw people getting shot and dying, I'm like, okay, things have escalated, but it never really comes back to the nursing home in terms of that event. I don't know,
The
that was, I thought, was a little strange.
I don't know. I think they just didn't go have an opportunity to go into it. The cops showed up. It became a thing, but they never really went back to that part. So I don't know if it just they didn't address it or what. But when that oxygen tank got shot and like flew up and hit
That
that
was
guy
funny.
in the head, like that, it was just so ridiculous, but it was very well done and comical. I laughed a lot.
Well, yeah, and I thought we'd see that too. That she had other contacts or something, and that it's like, oh, I'm putting her in this other facility now, and like I'm going to meet with this other doctor. Since I have custody of this person, like I'm assigning her this new doctor that I know, and that we'd see another level of corruption there. That it's like, oh no, it's not just in this little community. This is a grift that she's running with more than she's using more than this small group, or she has other resources. There's enough bad people for that. I thought we were going to see that after the shooting. So yeah,
Well,
you make a good point.
I think part of that too was you look at Fran or Frankie as her police colleagues called her. I think that was her in with the police too, was through Fran, because when she was at the station, she had the one female cop talking to her, and to me, it implied that she used to be an officer, like she used to be a cop, and that's probably how she got the the police to be not necessarily on her payroll, but so that way she at least knew what was going on or how she could manipulate those aspects of the grift also.
Well, absolutely, because it's the sort of thing where they think they're helping out Frankie because they're like, oh yeah, she's an old friend and she used to be a cop and everything, and yeah, I saw it that way too. That seems to be the case and explains her investigative skills and everything. Like, but they think they're helping out Frankie and Frankie's girlfriend, who seems to be viewed by the part of the community that's not in the know as a saint. Oh, she's helping all these elderly people. What they're doing is a good thing. So yeah, absolutely. It's like they're unwitting. They have a like outside of their network of people who know what they're doing and help with it. There's also a network of people that think that they're doing a good and charitable thing by helping them out.
We also have the other major sort of item in the film, that being the diamonds. They play a role throughout most of the plot, especially early on when Marla is not really clear why this lawyer is trying to get Jennifer Peterson out, and then she starts to think, well, maybe it has to do with the diamonds, when in fact it really doesn't. I mean, they're a part of it, but it really isn't the real reason. So they served a purpose for the first part of the movie because she wasn't she didn't think the mob was after her. She just thought it had to do with these diamonds. And then the second part of the film, their role was more of, I think, symbolic of greed, because then it became all about getting these damn diamonds, and it became about money, greed, and all that stuff. Um, Yet again, I know maybe I'm looking too much into it. At the end of the film, when it appears that her and Fran are getting married, the ring has the diamonds on it. She's gifting it to her. Now the diamonds, she's gotten the diamonds. They're part of her relationship. Yet again, more feeding into the idea of the embracement of money, power, greed. Like I said, maybe I'm looking too much into it. Where do you guys feel about the diamonds and their role in
I,
the film?
I don't think what you just said was wrong at all, because there is a couple lines when she was talking to Peter Dinklage where she mentioned, I want to be able to use money to push people around. So when you talk about greed,
She says weaponize it. I think she
Yeah.
uses, yeah.
she was like, I want to use it as a weapon. I want to be able to, I think she said, like, bully people or push them around. I want to have enough money to basically push them around and, use it as a weapon. So it's just, and this is an awful analogy, but I think of it like Monopoly. or any board game, if you are far ahead, you're able to kind of dictate what happens. Look at poker or anything else where money, you're able to kind of bully people into a position. And I think that that's what her end goal was to have enough money to do whatever she wanted, but to also even be even more powerful. So I think that it was about greed and power, 100%.
Well, absolutely. It's the sort of thing where, as she mentions, like with the words she said, that whole speech, and the fact that she's trying to weaponize it and everything. It's the fact is, and she seems to realize this, like, if she has enough money, it wouldn't matter that she's messing with this mobster. Like, he wouldn't be able to threaten her the way that she does, and she wants to become untouchable, which is why, the one scene where she seems truly desperate because she's gritting her teeth when she's telling him is where she's like, just pay me off. It's the easiest thing to do, because that's all she really wants is that measure of power.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's yet again why I was sort of disappointed they killed her off, because like I said, I'm not rooting for her. I don't want her to win, but I think the message is people like her do win, and that's why I didn't want her to be taken out. And and I know, like I said, some people were not happy about the character's portrayal, but I think in storytelling you need to be able to show bad people and their origins and how they form. Like I said, I bring up shows like Breaking Bad or The Sopranos, where your main focus, the main character of your series, are bad guys, are not good guys. They're monsters, and you spend most of your time with them, and you sort of humanize them to a degree. But I think it's okay to do that in a story. You should not idolize Tony Soprano. He's not a hero that you want to be like. That's not the goal, and neither is Marla Grayson, but people like her do exist. And so, I don't know. That was my last thoughts as far as the story of the film.
Well, yeah, exactly. And, for those that say they humanized her too much, you got to think about, like you said, your Tony Sopranos, your main character from Thank You for Smoking. It's like, they have lives, like, and honestly with that one, he was humanized way more than this character, and everybody loved that performance.
Yes.
And they played him as a hero. They didn't play her as a hero. They just played her as human.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and right now, we were talking about doing Snowfall as one of our shows, and I am 2 episodes from finishing the previous 3 seasons or whatever. And when you look at these characters, and this isn't a spoiler, so I'm starting right at the very beginning for people who are wanting to catch up on that show also. It's about drugs and crack, how it was used in the 80s. And some of the main characters in this show, you're not necessarily rooting for them, but you empathize with them. You like these characters. And the people who are good, like there's cops who are good, and you end up rooting against them. You're like, fuck that guy. And it's just weird sometimes that you're just like, these people are awful people, but they make them human. And some of the stuff they do, you're just like, I get why they're doing some of these things. And you end up liking those characters, regardless of how awful they are. But to me, that's a reflection of writing. Most villains, like you guys said, aren't the Doctor Dooms or Thanos or these world-ending bad guys that are clearly evil. Sometimes they don't look evil. Sometimes they're very normal people with very evil intent.
Right? Yeah. I mean, and how often do you meet a person that you're like, man, it seems like such a cool person to hang out with, and he's like, yeah, but you dig a little deeper than surface level, that person is horrible.
Yes. The Devil's Rejects. It was interesting by the end of the film, and Rob Zombie said this, his intent was to do this. He wanted to lay out a group of characters that were absolute pure evil, and by the end of it, he wanted you rooting for them. And he did it on purpose. And yes, he manipulates the audience with certain things he does. And by the end, when the sheriff is getting his revenge, his justful revenge, you sort of want him to lose and you want them to get free. And you're like, but they're horrible monsters and they're serial killers. And you just spent hours showing us them doing all these horrible things. There's a little bit of manipulation in how he wrote that film. But this film does that a little bit as well. But I think it's okay to tell those kind of stories. That's the point I'm trying to make. It's okay to, you can tell those kinds of stories. It's fine to do that. You don't.
Well, yeah,
But
absolutely.
that's my opinion.
Like, in one final example, and which I think would drive it home for a lot of people, is Walter White from Breaking Bad. You should by no means like Walter White. It's spelled out very clear, throughout the series. It's like, he's not a great guy. He's not a good person. He's not someone to emulate, but interesting to follow, absolutely, and still a very human person with very human goals. And to not show him as that is incredibly unrealistic.
My final point, I saved it for the end because it's not that important in the grand scheme of things. But I hated the soundtrack. I hated. I'm sorry. There were several points in the movie where I was like, what is this? Larry, you described it as like synth light, which yeah, like I love synth. There's a film Drive. I love the film Drive. Love that movie. I love the soundtrack in that film. If you're gonna go for the electronic synth sound, go for it. This didn't really embrace it to the extent it needed to. Some of the soundtracks felt very generic. I don't know it. It worked in a couple scenes, very few though. There were certain scenes where, to me, it took me out of the film a little bit. I don't think that the music that was orchestrated for this film necessarily worked with this film. That's how I felt. Guys, do you disagree, or what do you think?
I loved the fact that it felt like we made a movie and used a bunch of royalty-free music.
Or should I? Or yes, thank you. Because there were certain scenes where it's like, I've written music like that. Like it's shit. Like, I've done a few little short films and I did a little music. That's what it sounded like, and that's not good.
That's what I'm saying. It felt, for as much money as they spent on the actors and how amazing the movie was. I loved the development of the characters. There's so much I liked, but it felt like they were, maybe one of the editors was like, "Hey, I do music too." And they were like, "Really?" So
my cousin
guy talked his way into a job. Like,
it's funny you mentioned that, because I was just going to bring up. You remember that era where like every rich kid wanted to pretend to be a DJ?
That era is going on now. What are you talking
about? Exactly. It's like
that's not over.
It's like the director's, son or daughter, were just is like, yeah, I make music, and it's like, yeah, you do make great music. Like, is it good enough to be in your film? Like, oh, absolutely, you're going to do the soundtrack for us. It's like, my kid mixed a thing. Can we make that the soundtrack? Synth's really big right now, and all they did was use like YouTube royalty-free synth music.
Well, and there was a scene. It was towards the end. The music finally wasn't super synth heavy, and I was like, okay, this.
There was some piano stuff going on.
Yes, and I was like, it was a dramatic part. It was kind of sad. Marla's dying, and then right after she died, it switched right back into synth again, and I'm like, what the fuck? And the whole car sequence where they're getting all the stuff together to try and take out, Peter and stick him in the middle of the woods, like that whole sequence, instead of being, I don't know, it felt like it was trying to be an 80s movie set in today with even shittier synth music. It was just weird.
It was bad synth music.
Well, I will say this much too. I'm glad you mentioned that scene, because the scene where they're preparing and then they tell the driver, that was the most unrealistic thing. Well, to me in this movie, one of the most unrealistic aspects, the fact that, it was night when they started telling them. It was day when he arrived where he was going, and he didn't notice them once. And they're like, what, maybe 30 feet back at best. Didn't notice that the same car followed him all the way from his house to his place of business. It started out middle of the night, and then when he got there, it looked like it was early morning sometime.
Yeah, that just felt like rushed plot. They were just like, yeah, they get from here to here, and
They tell him.
They tell him. Yeah, I agree. But that was my major complaint. Overall, like you said, Spencer, I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was a solid 2 hours. With a few. It wasn't perfect by any means, but it was a lot of good performances, interesting storytelling, interesting taking the concept of guardianship over the elderly and making it such a disturbing part of the film. So I would definitely recommend it to others. Yeah. Anything else you guys want to say regarding I Care a Lot?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it was just it was a pretty good movie, and made me afraid of something. I got a new phobia now. I'll say that much.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for listening. Like I said, leave a sub, hit the bell so you'll know when we put other videos up. If you have any other movies you'd like for us to check out, let us know. And that includes movies that haven't come out yet. There's a lot of movies that'll be coming out. I believe Netflix has a free movie every, well, not free, you're paying for it, but a new movie every single week. And yeah, if you disagree with anything we said, that's cool too. Leave a comment, let us know what you think, and we'll try and get back to you. And yeah, thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.